conference. But we have Mike Rooney here to talk. He's the expert. We are just fans now. We are no longer players. We are not the experts. We are fans. Mike Rooney, I appreciate you coming back on. Friend of the show. I think we figured out all of the technical difficulties that we had last time, so we appreciate you joining us again.
Yeah, good to see you guys. When you said you're just fans, Mikey, it made me think of whenever we put something on, like there's a ranking that fans don't care for. There's my favorite comment is they say that we don't know ball. Like that's, and it kind of felt like you were saying that about yourself, is that you're just a fan. You don't know ball anymore, even though you played in the big league. So I don't think that's the case, but I appreciate that humility on your part.
I appreciate you giving us some props. I like to think that we know a little bit about what we're talking about, but sometimes we get the purple and gold glasses on here. So it's nice to have an unbiased opinion, but let's get into it. Obviously, LSU hasn't gotten off to the start that they had hoped in the SEC. They're 3-9 with 18 games left. They are at the bottom of the SEC West standings, at the bottom of the SEC standings as a whole. Super talented team. I don't believe it has anything to do with talent. They just haven't really put it together. What are you seeing from somebody who's not as close to the program as us, someone who's seen it from afar? What are you seeing on your side?
Yeah, I'd say I'm thinking of the LSU situation in two ways. It's like what like the 2024 season, and then just ongoing. What does this program need to look like? And I think if we just focus on 2024, it's probably going to be fine, right? 3-9 in the league is a disaster. I get that. And losing 4 straight series is unprecedented. And an RPI of 45 with a 3-7 record against Q1 teams, none of that is right. Good. But you think about it, if LSU can go 11-7 down the stretch in the SEC, and that puts them at 14-16, you're probably in the NCAA tournament at that point, and who knows what can happen. Nobody would want to see LSU show up in their regional as a 2 seed or a 3 seed. But I'm curious what you guys think on this regard. My concern with LSU is not, like you said, they're super talented. That's still the case. It just doesn't seem the same.
Right.
Last year's team had, and we knew they were going to lose this, right? Gavin Dugas, Jordan Thompson, Riley Cooper, Kate Beloso, Trey Morgan, Paul Skeens, Dylan Cruz, Ty Floyd. Skeens and Cruz are big leaguers, so that's a huge loss. But there's that's the heartbeat of this team, that team last year. And so I think that's what they're missing. The team looks a little lethargic, not lazy lethargic, but just disconnected.
Yeah.
And, so here's the question I want to ask you guys. I think one of the things from the outside that always makes LSU baseball special is they can recruit the country, but there's this fabric of Louisiana kids that would run through a wall for LSU baseball. Chris Burke would say the care factor is off the charts. And then you mix that with the national, the ability to recruit anyone you want, really. And I just, I look at LSU right now, I don't see a ton of Louisiana kids that are playing. And I'm not saying that please don't hear me say, Jay Johnson, here's the fixture problem. Just start filling out the lineup card with Louisiana kids. I'm not saying that. But I'm just saying, when I see this team looking not the same and a little disconnected and a little there's a little bit of a zombie feel to it. I don't know. What do you guys think? Is it it doesn't have the same Louisiana fabric as usual?
I'm glad
am I oversimplifying that?
I'm glad you said that, because we actually talked about this on the show on Monday, and I've talked about it a lot off air, and some of the other conversations I've had is you're 100% right. You lose super talented players last year, and Dylan Cruz and Paul Skeens. You can't expect to replace those guys because those guys are 1 and 2 in the draft, right? You don't get those guys very often, but you also have to replace the Belosos and the Joe Bears. And you have, the Dugases and all the guys who have been there for 4, 5, 6 years, some of them 6 years, right? And you only have 2 of those guys on this team, in Travinsky and Milazzo, right? Travinsky's been playing every day. Milazzo's, kind of mixes and matches, comes in at the back end of the games as a defensive replacement. But I think you're 100% right. You don't have the guys that you normally have even they don't even have to play. In 2009, I made the example of 2009. We had a bunch of 4th and 5th year seniors that a lot of them didn't even play, but they had the fabric and they had the leadership of the team. And I'm with you. I think that's kind of missing. You can't recreate that, right? You can only create that by having those guys stay in the program, for those years. And I think that with the NIL and transfer portal and all of those types of things, You're seeing less and less of these guys stay at one program for 4 or 5 years and be that older veteran leader. We saw with UConn in basketball. UConn's was a very veteran team in basketball, and you see they've won 2 straight. Like it matters in sports, and especially in baseball, right? Especially when in Louisiana. So I agree with you. I don't think that it feels the same as it has in the past as far as Louisianians on the team. But you got some young guys that are from Louisiana that you would hope that would grow into that role. And I think Jay's kind of trying to find that perfect mix. You mentioned 14 and 16, right? If they go 11 and 7, which I think is very doable, I think it's possible for them to even do better than that. But based off of what we've seen, 11 and 7 seems doable. Is 14 the number that they have to get to feel comfortable making it to the NCAA tournament? And if they got to 15 and 15 and they started playing really good baseball down the stretch, is there a possibility that they can somehow sneak into like a regional host?
I mean, anything, you know how it goes, like anything's possible. Like, is 14 and 16 comfortable? It will be extremely uncomfortable the night before the selection show, right? Like, if you're under 500 in the league, you are not sleeping, and not that Jay Johnson is sleeping the night before the selection show. Even if he was the number 1 seed, he would be awake all night, texting all of us. But I think it's hard to say. The problem for LSU right now, to me, is like, what are the signature wins on this resume? Like, the Minute Maid deal is good because Louisiana, the Raging Cajuns are killing it, so that's a big win. The Texas win has lost a lot of shine. Like, they're, kind of middle of the pack in the Big 12. So, that makes the series against Tennessee this weekend and the series against A&M really important, because if you want to host, you're going to need to have more on the resume than just 15 SEC wins. You're going to have some wins, like a series win that says, okay, boom, like this is a team that has found its way. But I actually don't think hosting is that big a deal for this team. Like, the best version of this team would be a nightmare to show up in your regional. Like, they're so talented. But we haven't seen, I don't know, like, you guys watch it closer than I do. Obviously we all watch LSU, but the best version of this team, they feel like they're a pretty good distance away from that version of themselves. Like, the real question is, how do they bridge that gap? And I don't know what the answer to that is.
Jay, I think you got one for him, right?
Yeah, Mike, I'm so glad you brought it to that, because where you started with that answer and where you ended with that answer, right in the middle of that is kind of what I wanted to talk with you about, in the sense of, so you see this team, and anything can happen this week. We've seen it before. We've been lucky enough to be a part of teams that's kind of done some crazy things that we didn't think could be done, right? But like you said, where you're seeing this team at today, if you're looking at them from the outside looking in, do you see this team getting some of these guys to either step up on the mound, step up in the lineup to be able to get that team over the hump and into a spot where you're like, hey, they got a chance. They may make a run.
Yeah, I think I think about Ole Miss a couple years ago, right? Like, Ole Miss, with 3 weekends left, they're 7 and 14 in the league. Like, I think it's easy for us to forget that. We talked a lot about it a couple years ago, but 7 and 14, like, you're done, right? Like, your season's over. And next thing you know, they're national champions. And I get it. Like, it was, they go 7 and 2 down the stretch. But the difference for that Ole Miss team was Tim Elko's sitting there, right? Kevin Graham's sitting there. Justin Bench is sitting there. I actually think this LSU team is probably significantly more talented than that Ole Miss team. But I don't see a Tim Elko on this LSU roster. Gavin Dugas was Tim Elko, right? Like, those kids are gone. And so I think that's what I'm so curious about with this LSU team, is who are the 1 or 2 or 3 guys that are going to say, fellas, get behind me and let's go. We're going forward. I don't know who the leaders of this team are. And, but it's going to take that. I don't think Jay Johnson can coax them into that type of run. This is going to, I don't want to be critical of Tommy White here, but I'm just going to say it. Tommy White is a great player, but I don't see him as put a C on his chest. I don't think that's Tommy's gig. Tommy's gig is, you need 3 hits tonight, I'm going to get you 4.
Right.
But, and he's playing great defense. But so that's what and maybe LSU's team doesn't know who their dudes are this year. That to me seems like the real challenge.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because that's my thought process on this. When I watch him, you bring up Tim Elko, and I think, okay, the Tim Elkos is the type of guys that get you going into a rubber match on Sunday and they get you over the hump and you win a series. Instead, seemingly we haven't had the Tim Elko step up that can rally the troops and get guys behind them. And they've gone the exact opposite way on Sunday. They've gotten Tim Rule 3 times on Sunday. And that, for me, is where I'm like, that's why I worry about this team, because that shouldn't happen. It's one thing if you get railroaded on Friday, Thursday or Friday, and you get beat again on Saturday, and then you get 10 ruled on Sunday. You're like, well, you're probably just not that good of a team. You probably have some holes in the lineup, have some holes in the staff. You're just probably not a very good team. But they go into these games, and it's a rubber match. You have a chance to win a series, and it goes completely the other way. That for me feels like either super young or they're all looking around and saying, who's the leader? Who's going to actually step up and get this thing done?
Yeah, and maybe it's one of the young guys. Like maybe it's Jared Jones. Like I like the way Jared Jones, like, you know, every time I watch LSU play, Jared Jones is glaring at somebody and somebody's glaring at Jared Jones. Now they're not coming up on Jared Jones because that would be a bad career move. But you know, like they're definitely exchanging words. And so, but you know, he's a sophomore, right? It's not easy to be a leader as a sophomore. I don't know. Like it's going to be really interesting because, as you know, like, this team, anybody would trade rosters with Jay Johnson, right? Like just the sheer talent on this roster, you'd bet on that all day long. It's going to be, I mean, LSU is going to be must-see TV down the stretch because you know they're not going to just fold up their tents. But what they're doing right now is not working either.
Yeah, look, you mentioned the freshman. We've talked about that too. Maybe it's a freshman that doesn't lead them the whole way, but sparks them and then really starts to bring the older guys and the guys that have been there and have that experience in the at-bats. They kind of bring them along, right? You kind of saw it last night. Jay shuffling up the lineup. He had Jared Jones leading off. He had 2 freshmen, Kucherak, who hadn't played all year. I only had 7 at-bats, started at shortstop. You had Larson, who's been playing really well as of late, got a start in the outfield. Kling was back in there. Kling had another couple hits. Opposite field, right center field double. We've been talking about that for the last 4 weeks. I need to see him do something like that to feel like his swing is starting to come back. He's done that a few games in a row, so that looks good. My point in bringing up all of those changes in those lineups, Jay has tried to figure out the magic lineup all year. He likes to mix and match. He likes to put guys in and out. As a player, sometimes, especially as a young player, sometimes you wish, man, just give me 2 weeks to show you. Let me get comfortable in this lineup. Do you think that's something that we could potentially see going forward? Because the other side hasn't really been that effective as of up to now.
Yeah, I think it's tricky, right? Like, and Jay is, you're right. Like, Jay is going to, he's going to overcoach, not undercoach, right? Like, that's always going to be his way. And I think one of Jay's really it's an unusual strength is that he can keep the bottom of his roster alive as good as anybody. Meaning, like, a guy will not play for a month and then come out of nowhere. That's hard to do. Like, a lot of coaches, when you bench a guy for a month, you might as well send him to summer ball. Yeah. But Jay is not that way. Like, he can keep that player alive, and the next thing you know, that player's a key guy. I think where a lot of coaches, their default position when they feel like they don't like the heartbeat of their team is they're just going to say, I'm going to fill up the lineup with my 9 toughest kids, you know, the kids that I think can take a punch, and let's just figure it out. And, you know, if you're on LSU's roster, you're good enough, right? Like, if you're even on the roster and you got a uniform, I know you're talented. So, but it'll be interesting, Mikey, because I think we are at the point for even the coaches that like to tinker, it's getting late early. Yeah. And most coaches are getting to the point in the season where it's like, if you don't know who your 9 are when you wake up every morning, that is not a good feeling. So it'll be interesting. Like, it's like, even I think about, again, I'm not taking a shot at Michael Braswell, who has played really well, right? But Jordan Thompson, like, you need some Jordan Thompsons right now where they can play poorly and they're still, like, I always love that about Jordan Thompson. Even when he played poorly and was getting just, you know, crushed by ridicule, he was always up for the next fight. Yep. Like, he never went backwards. There was no retreat in Jordan Thompson. It was like he was ignorant of what his stats were and when he made his last error. So, like, those are the type of kids that you need right now because, again, like we've said many times, there's plenty of raw talent.
A couple more questions about LSU before we go to the SEC as a whole, because the SEC has been very interesting, I guess, is a great way to say it. Florida's been very interesting. Obviously Tennessee's been good. Vanderbilt's been good. A&M's has been very good. It just doesn't seem like there's someone running away with it. Obviously Arkansas seems like but they don't swing it all that great. So I want to get into those kind of questions, but We talk about the lineup. I think going into the season, the pitching staff was the thing that everybody was looking forward to. This pitching staff is deeper. We've said it on this show a lot. This pitching staff is deeper than the pitching staff was last year. More talent from top to bottom. You're not going to miss much on the mound. You may even be better on the mound, and it has not been the case, right? Luke Holman's been good. Gage Jump's been okay, right? He's been good enough. They haven't found a number 3 starter. Thatcher Hurd hasn't been great, and the number 3 starter has been a Johnny Holstaff for the last month. As a guy that kind of evaluates baseball players and watches baseball players all around the country, how does this bullpen, how does this talented pitching staff stack up against some of these other schools? And who would you like to potentially see step up out of the bullpen?
Yeah, I think it's, one thing I will say is just if you look at it nationally, the group of elite pitchers feels bigger than normal, in college baseball. Like we're going to look up in July at the draft, and there's going to be a ton of college pitchers that are taken really early. But then there's like this abyss with 1 million college pitchers who are getting their brains beaten in right now.
Yeah.
Like it is, and I know like if you look at the stats, the home runs per game are literally the exact same number as last year, but it just feels like offenses are putting huge numbers up left and right.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I don't know. There's a lot of reasons, right? Like the bats feel hot, the balls feel hot. Yeah. I think pitching instruction is, pitching training is about all or nothing, right? Yeah. Like I either want to miss a bat or I don't care if I throw a ball.
Yeah.
And so like everything about pitching right now is high risk, high reward. And, like the risk is real and guys are in bad counts and they're throwing harder and they're more vulnerable. And so I think there's a lot of reasons, but I just, the offense is up. And so I think, for LSU, you're right. Like, I mean, Griffin Herring has been amazing. I mean, do you move him in the rotation? I'm sure you guys have talked about that a million times. I think Gage Jump, his numbers in the SEC aren't very good, but, like the kid had 16 college innings coming into the year. Like, to your point, you'll take what he's giving you. I mean, hey, if LSU wants to be who they want to be, Thatcher Hurd's got to figure it out. Nate Ackenhouse has got to be better. Like, Javen Coleman is talented, right? Like, Justin Lohr is lost at sea. Gavin Guidry, like, that's one that's shocking. I don't know. There's plenty of choices there. It's just going to be a matter of, we talked about this last year, I think, like I felt like we talked about Jay's got to settle on 7 or 8 arms and let just roll. Yeah. And you asked about it with the lineup, Mikey. Maybe it's with the pitching staff. Like, hey, you 7 or 8 are getting the ball and that's it. And, don't look in the dugout. Like, we're not taking you out of the game. Maybe that's the answer right there. But, I would say LSU's not the only one with pitching problems. Pitching's been hard to come by.
Mikey asked you about the guy out of the pen that would step up. Before we move into kind of the SEC talk and the national kind of perspective of this whole thing, that Sunday spot's wide open. And, you've been seeing Griffin throw really well, but we haven't seen another guy who can get out there and get you 4 to 5 to 6 innings. Who do you think that they can slide into that spot? Because a lot of the other names you mentioned as well have all been, as we've seen them in purple and gold, they've all been pretty much bullpen guys and guys that have come out of the pen. Who do you think can slide into that Sunday spot and start to get you that kind of a quality outing?
And there's one guy you didn't mention either, but I'm gonna see if it pops in your head. He's a young guy. He's been throwing a lot.
Yeah, so the Cade Anderson is the Louisiana freshman, if I'm not mistaken, and he's been really good in the midweek. And if I was Jay, and I'm not there every day clearly, but I would say, okay, I feel like my offense has got a chance to be good. The other team's not going to have a good Sunday starter either, right? Like, now I know Arkansas is an exception, right? But everybody else, and he doesn't even have, you guys aren't playing Arkansas, or you already played Arkansas. So yeah, there you go. It's all good. You don't have to worry about that anymore. So I would, well played. I would say, like, who can take a punch, to beat up the boxing analogy? Like, I want somebody that's going to choke, get me 15 outs. I don't care how ugly it is. This kid's not going to back down, and just and send a message to my offense that, hey, just whatever. I don't care how we win this game. Let's just go win this game. But it can't be somebody that's going to walk people. Like, that's for me, and maybe that's a little old-fashioned, but when you start walking people, that's when your offense starts to feel like, oh, man, we're going to put up 12 today. So that would be my thought is, like, who's trustable, who throws strikes, and isn't scared, give me that dude. And if that's Cade Anderson, man, I don't know, could Gavin Guidry even start? I don't know. I want somebody that's got a little, what in their neck.
Yeah, I agree with you. The walks have been a problem out of the pen and on the staff as a whole, but definitely once you get to Sunday, especially we're getting into that time of the season too, where it's hot, series is long. You can't have guys out there where it's just walk after walk and you're leaving guys out there on the field like that. It's going to be hard for them to come back in and put up anything offensively, and it's also hard for them to play defense by.
Yeah.
Pitching performance like that. So you need someone who's going to get up there and literally just challenge the strike zone. If you get beat around, you get beat around, but you give yourself a team, your team a chance to actually stay in the fight.
Who's your guys' choice? Is it Cade Anderson? Who do you guys want to see in that role?
You named both of them.
Obviously, we don't coach the team, so it really doesn't matter. But that's the guy. When I saw him throw against Southeastern earlier in the year, just the moxie that he pitched with, the competitiveness that he pitched with, the attitude that he brought to it, I was like, he's young. He's really only dominating them with one pitch right now. But that's who I give a chance on Sunday because I know he's just running and filling it up.
Yep. I like Griffin Herring too, but the only I kind of backed off of that because I think Jay likes having him being able to finish that game with home, and that's kind of worked well for him the last, the two of the three SEC wins. That's what happened. So maybe I don't think that's an option, but the Cade Anderson thing to me, one, he's looked really good. He's got an electric fastball, and I think the other stuff is going to continue to develop. But he's going to be your guy that you're going to rely on for the next 2 years. So why not give him some weekend experience in the SEC, knowing he's going to be potentially your ace for the next 2 years, right? They did it with Gausman when he came in as a freshman. I was a junior and he was a freshman, and Gausman took his lumps early in the year and ended up with a 3.5 ERA. Now, granted, it was a new BB Core bat, so they were as dead as they can be. But still, he got the experience, and then the next year he was the best pitcher in the SEC and got drafted 4th overall. So, I think to me, one, Cade Anderson's talented, and I think he can go deeper and he competes and he throws strikes. But two, he's going to be your ace, hopefully for the next couple of years.
Yeah, I'm in. That works for me.
Perfect. I'm glad I sold you. All right. Well, so LSU goes this weekend to Tennessee. Tennessee obviously has been a household name over the last few years. Obviously, they have been in Omaha. They've been, very a polarizing team, I guess you can say. And over the last few years, the rivalry with LSU has kind of gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. Well, LSU's going to Tennessee, struggling, looking for it. They're desperate for a series win. What can they expect? What does Tennessee have to offer? They're ranked in the top 10 in the country. Obviously, they're hitting home runs at a crazy rate. What does Tennessee look like as a team, and what can we expect as fans to see from them this weekend?
Yeah, I would say Tennessee's not who you want to play when your pitching staff is struggling, and you certainly don't want to play them in Knoxville. You guys have played there, I'm sure, but it is an unbelievable hitter's park. It plays very small. The ball flies. It's literally downhill. Center field, the base of the center field fence is lower than home plate. It is. Wow. You're literally hitting downhill. I say literally. That's what I've seen. But maybe some engineer could contradict that. But long story short, they're hitting 1 million home runs. And so I think the problem Tennessee presents is the game can be going along fine, and next thing you know, they put up a 5 spot, and they do it. It's like lightning striking, and it's a really deep lineup. They're physical, they're old. Their position player group is very strong. The one thing I'd say about Tennessee is they're a little vulnerable on the mound. Their ace has been AJ Causey, and he's been brilliant at times. He's had a couple really, really rough starts. And you all are familiar with Drew Beam. Drew Beam is as tough of a competitor as there is, but Drew Beam is not a guy that's going to go 7 innings, 1 hit. He's going to just manage traffic and pitch his way. Drew Beam is like that 30-year-old big leaguer who just never gets sped up and just can pitch out of trouble, all that type of stuff. So I think you can score on Tennessee. The question is, can you hold them down enough to beat them? And Tennessee has dropped some games. I actually thought I picked them as my national champion before the season. And I just, they're 7-5 in the league, right? I know they're 27-6 overall and they, have 1 million home runs, but I think if your pitching can hang in there and your offense, it's going to be a great place to hit. Again, they're 7-5. It's not like they're sitting there at 11-1 and
Right.
in the league and piping hot. But it's going to be a tough place to play. Their fans are aggressive. The place is going to be juiced up. It's a tough place to play. You'll have your hands full there, but if LSU plays well this weekend, hey, maybe that crowd, because they're less than polite, right? Like maybe that crowd can help LSU find another gear.
As this thing plays out this weekend, how do you see this thing going? Like, is LSU going to have to win a couple of low-scoring ball games and be able to keep their offense kind of neutral? Or are they going to have to go there and basically bang it out and hit the ball all over the park and find ways to put up big numbers offensively to kind of come out there with a series win and or better?
So I think both. Mitch, I think so I'm going to say it this way. I think sweeping Tennessee at their place is probably an unrealistic expectation. So let's just take that off the table.
Right.
So now Jay's got to find 2 wins, right? So I think one of them is, hey, offense, like Tommy's got to have 4 hits and go deep twice one game, right? Like Jared Jones maybe goes deep twice in the same game. LSU's offense could trade punches with these guys on the right day. And so I think one of the wins is that. One of the wins is, I think if I'm Jay, it's like, hey, offense, you got to win one of these games. And then, hey, pitching staff, you got to win one of these games. Right?
Yeah.
Like Holman and Herring, sorry, but you got to do it tonight. Like we need 4 runs or less. And then, so I think that's the formula. One big offense day, one day where the day Herring pitches, that's got to be a win.
Yeah. No doubt. I completely agree. And I think you nailed it with the crowd, right? I think being at Tennessee on the road with a hostile environment and you go there and you're able to sneak out 2 wins, I think that's a really good way to jumpstart your season and, kind of have this trajectory of winning games and learning how to win. Because it feels like they don't really know how to win just yet with a bunch of new guys in